We're going to go over a few questions that we get fairly often. First one being, do I even need Medicare if I'm still working?
So yes and no. I'm going to say a little bit of that. First of all, most people when they're still working are going to get Medicare Part A. Medicare Part A is the hospital coverage and there's no monthly cost. So there's no reason really not to. Now there is one exception to that, and that's if someone has an HSA, a health savings account. There are some things we need to talk about, whether or not having Medicare Part A while actively contributing to an HSA is a good idea. So that's something we do have to talk about. But if an HSA isn't involved and someone turns 65 but is still going to work, getting Part A really is not a big deal. That's a good thing for them to add. It will make adding Part B a little bit easier down the road. Now, while they're working, they do not need Part B. Part B and Medicare, or Part B and employer coverage are not going to work well together. They are double paying, first of all, and they're not necessarily double covered. A lot of times they can end up in fights where the employer doesn't want to pay and neither does Medicare want to pay. Neither one really wants to be primary. So it can create issues in the billing sense. And so we don't want them to end up with being caught in the middle of no one paying their medical bills. So sometimes Medicare is the better way to go. Even while someone's working, they might want to switch to Medicare. You know, it could be the more cost-effective option. So if they're getting to that point, you know, we're 6 months out or so of that birthday, we'll do a sit down where we kind of go side by side. Okay, this is how Medicare is going to work and what it's going to cost. This is what your employer coverage looks like. Which one is the best way to go, right? Of course, if they have a younger spouse or someone else on their insurance, we need to take that into consideration. Their income is going to determine how much Medicare costs, so that can matter. There's a lot to consider. But those would be the things we would talk about on whether or not Medicare or employer coverage is the right way to go, but they really do not need both.
So what if they are eligible but don't want Medicare? Do they have to have it?
Yeah, that's probably not what everybody wants to hear, but really once you turn 65 or older, if you retire older, that's your option. You know, there really aren't any other options. You are going to need to have Medicare A and B for sure if you want any kind of hospital or medical coverage or doctor, things like that, once you're Medicare eligible. So there are other options you can add to Medicare. There are things that will walk you through what do or don't you need as far as adding to your Medicare. But if you don't get onto Medicare, you will actually be penalized. And that penalty is not a one-time penalty for delaying Medicare enrollment. It is a lifetime penalty, and it can start to get pretty hefty.